Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really digging into AMD, specifically their recent Q1 2025 earnings report.
Yeah, the one Yahoo Finance covered, and also looking at their outlook for Q2.
Exactly. Our mission here is, well, to pull out the key stuff from these results, understand what's really driving AMD right now.
And sort of place it in the bigger picture, the whole semiconductor industry.
Right. We want to give you a clear picture of where AMD stands, where they might be headed, without drowning you in financial jargon.
Think of it as the highlights reel. The important numbers, their strategy, the outside stuff affecting them. So you get the main story on AMD.
Okay, let's get into it then. The headline numbers, well, they certainly caught my eye. AMD didn't just meet expectations for Q1 2025, they beat them.
Yeah, pretty solidly.
So the adjusted earnings per share, EPS, that came in at 96 cents. Analysts were thinking more like 94.
And revenue was $7.4 billion, also topping the $7.1 billion forecast.
And just for context, when we talk EPS, that's profit per share of stock, basically.
That's right.
So beating that is, well, generally good news for profitability.
What's really striking, though, is looking back a year.
Oh, definitely.
Q1 last year, their EPS was 0.62 cents. Revenue was $5.4 billion. That's a really significant jump year over year, both metrics.
Huge growth. It really shows the momentum they've got going. What do you think is like the main thing behind that kind of growth?
It feels like strong product demand, maybe taking some market share, too.
Yeah, could be. And the market reaction was pretty clear, wasn't it? AMD's stock jumped, over 5%?
Yep. Investors definitely liked what they heard. It's always interesting seeing that instant feedback.
And looking ahead, it seems AMD isn't planning on slowing down. Their Q2 outlook is pretty positive, too.
It is. They're guiding for revenue between $7.1 billion and $7.7 billion.
Which, even at the low end, is still above what analysts were predicting, right? Around $7.2 billion.
Exactly. That signals some real confidence from AMD's leadership, about the next few months.
What does that confidence tell you, though? Especially with, everything going on economically.
It suggests they feel pretty good about their position, their products, the demand, even with wider uncertainties hanging around.
Yeah, and there was that quote from CEO Lisa Su.
Oh, right, yeah.
She said something like, despite the dynamic macro and regulatory environment, their Q1 results and Q2 outlook show the strength of our differentiated product portfolio.
And consistent execution positioning us well for strong growth in 2025.
Yeah, that bit about the differentiated product portfolio seems important.
It does. What makes their stuff stand out so much in such a, cutthroat market?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It points to having strong products across key areas, which actually brings us nicely to the segments.
Right. Let's break down how each part of their business did in Q1.
Okay.
Data center. That's a huge focus for them. And it delivered revenue hit $3.7 billion. Just over the $3.6 billion expected.
But like the overall numbers, it's the year-over-year comparison that's really stark. Absolutely. That $3.7 billion is way up from $2.3 billion in Q1 last year.
It's a massive leap. It shows really strong, growing demand for their stuff in servers, cloud infrastructure,
Like their ePYC server chips.
Yeah.
And the Instinct GPUs for AI.
Precisely. They seem to be tapping right into that need for high-performance computing.
Okay, moving to the client segment. So laptops, desktops, also impressive.
Yeah, $2.3 billion in revenue, beat the $2 billion expected, and again, way up from $1.3 billion last year.
Which is interesting, given all the talk about the PC market maybe slowing down or being uncertain.
It really is. It suggests that whatever's happening broadly, AMD is managing to, grab market share or just has products people really want.
Maybe the Ryzen chips are just hitting the sweet spot.
Could well be. They seem pretty competitive against, the other players.
Okay, now gaming. This includes their Radeon GPUs, graphics cards, and also the chips for consoles like PlayStation and Xbox.
Right. Revenue here was $647 million, also better than the $540 million expected.
But this segment has a few more wrinkles, doesn't it? Especially the console side.
It does. You've got to remember, the PS5 and the Xbox Series consoles, they're getting on a bit now in their life cycle.
Well, they're long, yeah.
And usually that means sales start to naturally slow down. People might be waiting for what's next.
So the fact they still beat expectations here is actually quite something.
It suggests demand is holding up pretty well, even late in the cycle.
And then there's the whole tariff thing impacting consoles. Microsoft raised the Xbox Series X price.
By $100, yeah, to $599. And some game prices went up too.
And Sony bumped PlayStation prices in Europe, though not the US yet. These outside factors must play a role.
Definitely. How do you think those price hikes affect things long term?
Tricky. Could soften demand a bit, but dedicated gamers might just pay up, especially short term.
Yeah, it's one to watch. Okay, so shifting focus a bit, let's look at those broader external factors. It's interesting to put AMD's results next to, say, Intel's.
Right. Intel also beat Q1 expectations, but their Q2 revenue forecast was lighter than expected.
And they specifically mentioned the current macro environment and elevated uncertainty.
Yeah, quite a different tone compared to AMD's outlook. What could be behind that difference?
Well, maybe AMD's strength in areas like data centers gives them more of a cushion against those wider economic issues. Or maybe it's just different product cycles, different market exposures.
Could be. Another big external thing, though, is those U.S. export controls on AI chips going to China.
Ah, yes, the tightened rules from April. That directly hits AMD's ability to sell things like their MI308 AI chip there.
And China's a huge market, potentially. So that feels like a pretty big roadblock.
It's a significant hurdle, yeah. Limits their access to a massive pool of demand for that high-end AI hardware.
And the potential hit to AMD. They mentioned possibly taking a charge up to $800 million.
Yeah, related to inventory they might not be able to sell, commitments they've made. It's a serious financial consideration.
What do rules like that mean more broadly for, like, innovation in AI chips?
It's complex. National security is the driver, obviously. But it can also slow things down, limit who can work together, limit market access. Companies like AMD have to rethink their global game plan.
And there's more potentially coming. Talk about new rules for AI diffusion.
Right, potentially needing special licenses for certain countries to get even limited numbers of US AI chips. Adds another layer of complexity.
Man, it really shows how tangled up these tech companies are in global politics and regulations.
Absolutely. And it's not just government rules. There's been that broader market pressure on AI stocks too, hasn't there?
Yeah, some nervousness about hype, maybe overvaluation.
Partly that, and also that news from DeepSeek earlier this year saying they could train powerful AI models using less advanced chips. That kind of muddied the waters a bit for the top-end chip demand.
So how does that market feeling affect AMD, even with good earnings?
Well, it could make investors a bit cautious, you know? Even if AMD is doing well, if the whole AI sector feels a bit shaky, that sentiment can rub off.
And one last thing, tariffs, the sort of ongoing saga.
Right. PCs made in China, Vietnam, Malaysia are currently exempt from some older tariffs.
But there's been talk about potential future tariffs directly on semiconductors, based on some Commerce Department investigation.
Exactly. And that just throws another big question mark over the whole industry. New chip tariffs could mess with costs, supply chains.
And ultimately maybe mean higher prices for us, for you, buying electronics.
It's definitely possible. So, okay, let's try and pull this all together.
Right. AMD. Very strong Q1. Beat expectations. Optimistic about Q2. Growth driven hard by data center and client segments.
We're also dealing with some pretty serious challenges. Those export controls to China are a big one.
And just the general uncertainty around global trade, regulations, the economy.
Exactly. So AMD's performance right now, it's like a snapshot of the whole semiconductor world. You see the amazing tech advances.
Butting up against geopolitics and economic realities.
Constantly interacting.
So thinking about all that, the innovation, the trade policies, demand, what do these results suggest about, like, the long-term strength and growth of the whole semiconductor sector?
Yeah.
And how that ripples out to other industries?
And maybe more fundamentally, beyond just these earnings reports, what other big things, what other factors do you think could really steer the future for companies like AMD?
Definitely something to mull over. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.